Joining us in the Movieland Spotlight this month is Chad Ferrin, a director known from his work on Nightcrawler, Pig Killer, and the new recent film Ed Killer. Thank you so much for joining us, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, can you tell us a little bit how you got started in the film industry and who inspired you?
Oh, God. I mean, growing up on a little Midwest farm, I was glued to a little black and white 13-inch television, So I was hooked on Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Outer Limits. I mean, all these great, shows that had, dark, horrific themes. And, it was just something that always interested me. I'd watch growing up 2 or 3 movies a day. I mean, when my parents got a VCR, it was like heaven. And, I just kind of knew I want to make this. And, I was probably 20 years old, and I was going to community college studying theater. And one day I'm just like, I got to make movies. I got to get out of Minnesota, and I got to, figure out a way to do it. And my mom said, well, you know what? You're one of your babysitters when you were a little kid. She's married to a movie producer out in Hollywood. Let me see if you're serious. I'll give a call and see if they can get you a job. And I said, yeah, I'm serious. So she called her up. She asked her husband, and her husband, Mike Leahy, said, have him come out. He can be a production assistant on The Prophecy. And I packed my car, drove out, and I've been in Los Angeles ever since. So that's how I got into the business, starting as a production assistant on numerous productions through them and kind of working my way up and learning the ins and outs of how to make a movie. And then in 1998, I sold my house in Minnesota and made my first film, Unspeakable, and been, doing it ever since.
Yeah, I seen on your filmography the first production assistant credits were on Hellraiser and Halloween. So, that would have been intimidating to be his first credits, don't you think?
No, it was great. I mean, for those 2 films, that same company did, basically reshoots for Miramax. And so, they said, hey, go work 2 weeks on Hellraiser and 2 weeks on, Curse of Michael Myers, and, getting to meet Doug Bradley was a huge thing, or Gary Tunnicliffe doing the effects. I mean, it was just an amazing time for, a kid in his 20s being on, with his idols, who would ever thought you working on a Hellraiser film or a Halloween film? It was just phenomenal.
Yeah, any great stories of working on those sets?
No, it's just, one of those things where everything, you look back on it, and at the time you don't appreciate it as much as maybe you should have. But, working with Michael Rooker on a film called Back to Back, and, going to his house and dropping off a script. And then there's Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. I mean, it was, things like that you're like, wow, this is great. But, you would just get so many of those things happening that after a time you get kind of desensitized to it, and you're just like, well, I want to be directing these people, or I want to write a script that they're in, or, one of those big hopes and dreams of, making it, and just no matter what it is, keeping my nose to the grindstone and working hard and never giving up on that dream of, making movies.
Yeah, that's great. You're staying positive, and that would have been a massive inspiration to start on those sets and get you going for your own projects for sure, I'd say.
Sure, definitely.
So, Chad, your filmography spans horror, thrillers, and deeply psychological storytelling. What first drew you to the darker side of cinema?
Again, it's growing up on a farm and seeing, animals dying and, killing them in some times. And, those are traumatic things. I mean, when something, dies in front of you, or it's kind of sticks with you. And, films definitely, for me, growing up kind of in an isolated area and being kind of social recluse, I just fell in love with cinema, all cinema, film noir, westerns, horror. I mean, everything was just that, and the escape into that from whether it's an abusive family or, being broke or whatever it is, it's one of those things of just you always have, an escape into film. And that was just something that I just, was drawn to from just a young age, and wanting to, tell my own stories or, write scripts or whatever it is just kind of evolved into something that I had to do working on limited budgets. You couldn't afford to buy a script, so you had to write one. You couldn't afford to pay an editor. You had to learn to edit. All of these things that, came out of a lack of budget, became kind of a love of just working in every aspect of getting a film made, and just falling in love with everything from production design to, craft service. I mean, anything and everything to make it the best possible production it can be for the money that you have at hand. And that's something that, I've just always been, from a young age, work as hard as you can, no matter what the job, and do the best job you can, whether you love it or you hate it. Don't, come up with excuses of why I did a half-assed job at, whatever, because I don't like it. Well, there's no excuses. If a movie that I make is a piece of shit, it's my fault. It's all on me, 100%. It's not the lack of budget. It's not the shitty script. It's not the whatever. It's me. It's my fault. I, fucked it up in one way, shape, or form, and I take, full responsibility for that. And when a movie does well and it gets out there and people like it, then, it's great. But, it's something that it's really just, you figure out what you love doing and you stick with it, and that's life. It's good, and it's fun just doing these things.
Let's talk about your new film, Ed Kemper, but in Australia called Co-Ed Killer. What inspires you to tackle one of the most disturbing real-life serial killers, and Ed Kemper in particular?
Well, it was, there's a producer that I made friends with on Facebook named Mike Mescal, and he did in the late 90s, Ed Gein, Hillside Strangler. I mean, they did, a slew of these true crime films that were released here in the States, and then, eventually around the world, and, pretty popular at the time. And we were friends, and he'd seen that I just did a film called Pig Killer and was doing pretty well. And he's like, "Hey, are you interested in doing any other true crime?" And I'm like, "Sure. What do you got?" And he's like, "I've got a script called, Ed Kemper, written by Steven Johnson, who had wrote Ed Gein, and, he want to take a look at it." And I'm like, "Sure, send it over." He sends it over. I thought it was great. I mean, it was a film that probably needed a $2 or $3 million budget as written. And I just said, well, let me see what I can find budget wise, and might have to do a rewrite. And if that's okay, here's what we can do, budget wise, probably in the, not nearly what you're looking for or what you're hoping for, but, I can tell you it'll get made. And he's like, "That's all we care about, get it made." So I rewrote the script to beef up the mother-son dynamic, and found some investors, and, called them up and said, "Look, we can make this in 2 weeks. We're ready to go. Sign this, and, you come on as a co-producer, and we'll get it made." And he was game for it. And we wrapped up the deal and shot the movie in 10 days and cut it, sold it. And here we are. Played a few festivals. It was one of those things. These things, for me, they go real fast. I don't sit back and, boy, I hope this one does well, or I hope the critics love it. I don't really give a shit. It's like I make these things fast and cheap and do the best I can. My heart and soul goes 100% into each product, each time. And it's got to be short and fast because I can burn out on it. I only have so much energy. Ed Kemper, to be honest, I'm done with that movie. I'm on to 3 other films. Dorothea is done. That's coming out next week. Another true crime film. We just shot Sunset Strip Killers, based on Carol Bundy and killing all these prostitutes in 1980. We just finished that. We're gearing up to shoot Richard Ramirez in February. So, as much as I love Ed Kemper, I love Dorothea, I love all these projects, and put as much energy for the brief moment of time I have to make them before I move on to something else, so I don't really get caught up on the positivity of the reviews or the negativity. It's a really refreshing thing not to have, because I've made films where you get so attached, and then it comes out and everyone hates it or whatever, and you're ready to blow your fucking brains out. So, but getting over that hump of, I don't care because I'm on to other films, and it's a really refreshing thing to be kind of reborn with each film. And, you've the mistakes you learned on the previous film, or ideas that you couldn't do on that previous film because of budget restraints or whatever. There's a little bit more money on the next film, and you're able to implement them. So it's really just an amazing thing to evolve, as a filmmaker, and not, I don't worry about, anything that could be negative anymore. I just try to be as positive and make the best films that I can for what I got in the time frame and the energy that I have to do that particular film.
I'm glad you're staying positive with it all. And during that brief period you're working on the Kemper's story, did you do any specific research or consult any experts when preparing to portray his story on screen?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I was really impressed with the script because, being a true crime fan, I know most all the top serial killers just, because when I was a kid, there was it was an encyclopedia of true crime, and it had really alphabetically every serial killer that there was, and it had, a paragraph of each thing. And Ed Kemper was one of the ones that was really interesting to me. And that's why the script was like an immediate, once I got it, started reading it, and then going through it, it's like, wow, this is really, it's accurate. He got the names right. He got the dates right. He got the girl locking the key. When he locked the keys in the car, she opened it up for him, let him back in, and then she ended up getting killed. All these little facts that, and he wrote the script before the internet and before the thing. So he actually did the real research and, read up on it, and he had his facts right. So I basically just kind of reread the case online, did some research of that, checked everything to make sure that he was 100% accurate, and then watched, Ed Kemper, has tons of interviews online, and, they're fascinating. He's a fascinating guy, smart, 138 IQ. I mean, diving into not only his crimes, but him as a person is a fascinating thing. And that's, one of the great things about these true crime films, of whether you like the movie or don't, it kind of sparks your interest of, oh, I didn't like the Netflix Ed Gein, but let me learn more about Ed Gein. And then you kind of go down that rabbit hole of, different things that are, fascinating or intriguing, or, it's the one of the great things with true crime is, it really happened, and you can, find in, my mother's friend, neighbor knew, there's connections throughout things that could, impact any one of us that in some way of knowing that person. Like my composer, Richard Band, who did the score for it, when I was writing the Richard Ramirez script, he said, oh, I met Richard Ramirez back, in like 1980. I had dinner with him twice, this girl I was dating. And it's just like, it's amazing that the composer I've worked with on like 8 films, had met a world famous serial killer, and that I'm writing a script on that killer, and that he's going to be doing the score for that film. It's just a weird, life imitating art, I guess.
Yeah, these true crime movies and documentaries are definitely more unsettling than most, and intriguing. Like, no one can look away at these things. They've got to be fascinated because it really happened. So you can't help. It's morbid fascination. Many filmmakers avoid showing too much of a killer's inner world. Did you want audiences to understand Kemper, fear him, or both?
I think both. I mean, there's nothing to shy away from it, if it happened. And, of course, some things had to be cut out to get an R rating or all that stuff. But it's still, I'm going to shoot him and be as accurate as I possibly can to what happened. We can't really know exactly the conversation when he picks up 2 college girls and they're in the car and, before he kills them. But, you try to, anytime you write these things and kind of get into someone's head, or especially that's where the interviews come in handy, and you kind of get away with how he speaks, or things that you can kind of interpret with that. And then what people said in the period and getting that correct for 1973. I mean, certain things of, just going with that and following it as true as possible, or of what you think actually happened, and, painting that picture accurate, and adding the horror elements to that of, someone being stabbed repeatedly and having that trauma that you have to look away from because you're disturbed by it. And then, knowing that actually happened is even more unsettling. And I think that's what draws me to true crime. It's not necessarily whether it's horrific or making a horror movie, but, there are definitely horrific elements to all of it. But, I think it's also painting a picture of the victims, Ed Kemper and his life, of how he got there, and, kind of figuring that out instead of just a 90-minute guy slashing and killing victims with, I'd rather paint his story, paint the victim's story, bring it all together, and then kind of, have everything kind of collide, and, and hopefully people, see that at least it's not just, a cash grab of Ed Kemper. There's, I think, respect paid to the victims, and there's also, respect paid to him. You can't just, have this monster. There has to be a human side of it, I think, to make it relatable to the audience. And that's hopefully what we we achieved with having, because his mother was abusive and domineering, and that was definitely something important for me to show and to, give the audience a feel of why he might have done the things that he did. As and I think his home life and his upbringing definitely, helped spur the killer in him.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see it, absolutely. But yeah, the new Monster series from Dahmer to Ed Gein has ignited public interest in infamous killers. Did that influence or inspire your creative direction at all?
No, but it definitely helped in, selling the selling the film before it was even done. We were in post-production editing it, and then Dahmer was number one and doing huge numbers. And, I just, Jeffrey Decker, who is, one of the producers on it, he had a connection with Dread, the company that put it out here in the US. And I said, hey, see if they're interested in the film. Here's some screenshots, images from each scene, and see what they think. And, and I said, be sure and tell them, well, take a look at the true crime series on Netflix, Dahmer. It's doing huge. And they basically had an offer for me within 24 hours. And, they bought this film and they bought my next one, Dorothea, which comes out next week. And we're doing the Richard Ramirez film in February with them. So, I mean, and it's, in part thanks to the popularity of the Netflix series.
Kemper briefly made an appearance in the Ed Gein TV show. I don't know if you have seen it, but it'd be good to see their take on him as well. Like, what did you think of the Ed Gein series? Did you watch that yet?
No, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard, mixed things on it. I mean, the trailer I thought looked great, and I'm interested in checking them all. I thought Dahmer was really good, so I mean, I think their stuff is is no matter what, it's interesting and well shot and worth a look.
Yeah, I guess some people were expecting it to be more brutal. I think that's what I was expecting too when I first got into Ed Gein. Like I wasn't truly like educated on Ed Gein. Like I knew a lot about him, obviously Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all the influences that he's put out in the world. But I think, as I said, I think people were expecting something more crazy brutal when it's more it's sad almost watching his story. Like it's almost like watching a baby, and I know Charlie Hannon said don't sympathize with him, but I couldn't fucking help it. Like it's just I almost wanted to cry through the show. I'm like this poor guy. Like obviously poor victims too. Like don't get me wrong. Like it's but this guy was deeply troubled, and it just made me sad. Like it was brilliant. Like I got to say, like out of all three, it is brilliant. And if you go in there not expecting brutal killings and just, for a deep drama, like Charlie Hunnam he invested his soul into this role as well. Like I can see he put everything into it, and it's brilliant. Like I didn't want it to stop. So out of all three, I got to say Ed Gein's my favorite one. I don't get the critics. Like again, I'm trying to understand it by saying it's probably just because they wanted something more brutal and didn't get it.
Sure. No, I'll definitely check it out. That's a good review for it.
Yeah, but another Netflix killer show, I think it's underrated, and I'm curious if you've seen it. It's called Woman of the Hour. Did you check that one?
No.
Is inspired by the true story of Rodney Alcala. Like, I wasn't familiar with that. I didn't even know it was a true story until the very end of the movie, and I was just like, wow, that was real. That choked me up, man. And I could just the whole thing is brilliant. Like this actually really happened. He like went on a game show, like a dating game show, and he's a serial killer. And he's trying to
I've heard of that one. Yes.
Yeah. Like he just killed a bunch of people. Now he's on a game show. And now he's trying to like kill the game show. This guy's crazy. The guy that they cast as the killer, brilliant. I can't wait to see. He's got a really short filmography, but I can't wait to see what he does next. But yeah, Woman of the Hour, definitely recommend that one.
Yeah, no, I had that on my list because I think it's a female director too, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
It was the main actress. She was in Twilight and everything.
Yeah.
Anna Kendrick. Yeah, don't sleep on that, man. Oh my God.
No, I'll check that out now.
Yeah, if you were going to direct an episode of Monster, which figure or story would you want to explore and why?
Wow. Well, seeing, I'm doing, Richard Ramirez next, I guess that would be the one I would want, a huge budget behind, and working with them would be amazing. But, to me, I'll tell you, that was the hardest script I've ever written, and it's the most vile, gut-wrenching you know, it gives me, I've had to, just put it so far out of my mind. It was really traumatizing. He did some fucked up stuff, and it's really just there's no redemption. You do that for 120 minutes with numerous victims, that's a thing. And for the script, for me, it's like, I'm going to do this like a Fulci film. This is going to be a true horror film, true crime, and all of it is true from, his own words, for 120 minutes. And, the distributor was like, this is really extreme. And I'm like, well, look, the detective angle and all that stuff has been done before with him. There was a TV movie in the 90s, and it's a great, it's very accurate of what happened and what went down. But if you're going to make this on a low budget, and I'm going to do it as extreme and nasty and as awful as humanly possible, because that's what went down. And, and getting, them to agree to that was, I'm still pinching myself. I can't believe they're making it. But, if Netflix, they've got, like you said, they're pretty extreme stuff with the, Ed Gein, and they don't seem to be afraid to pull punches on that. So, I mean, that would be definitely something if, I'm making it. So other than that, I can't imagine, any other, to me, Richard Ramirez is one of the top, everyone in the world knows who the Night Stalker is. So to me, that was one of the, the top true crime film for me to reach and to be doing.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see who else they go into with the Netflix series. I think they're going to go with Kemper eventually, since he featured briefly in Ed Gein.
Sure.
And I like, when I say shocking true crimes, for me, like I when I think of those ones, I think they probably wouldn't even cross the line and go with that. Say like Albert Fish or Andre Chikatilo, like especially because those ones are the most shocking for me.
Albert Fish one would be amazing. I mean, that's. And, anything you can touch upon that hasn't been done, or like you said, that won't be done is even more exciting to go for.
Ted Bundy was in Ed Gein as well, very briefly. And I mean, he's crazy. It's crazy as hell.
Yeah. No, I'm sure that, you would think they'd probably tackle that as well. They've got, so many to choose from and to keep doing them.
So what were some of the biggest challenges bringing Ed Kemper to life? Like casting, tone, recreating the period?
Yeah, I would say, recreating the period is the toughest thing, or finding, locations that don't have any, things that are out of period. I mean, it's like almost everything from a parking sign or whatever it might be is stuff that didn't exist then. So it's just kind of finding those things and, without those things and, getting it out. So you do kind of have to be aware of the right, sync knobs or light switches in the house, or, all the little details that I definitely, when I see a movie that's supposed to be period, I'm like, wait a second, they didn't have a 3-prong outlet in, 1950, certain things that, growing up, again, watching, tons of movies and just being, a fan of, like, say, film noir and, every decade of cinema, you pay attention to all these things. So, what 1970s would have looked like. If you watch enough Brady Bunch episodes, what a 1970s, kitchen looks like, or, a bedroom or whatever it might be. And so many films, no matter their budget, get a lot of stuff wrong. I remember seeing The Irishman, and he's driving, like a 1950 pickup truck, and they pull over and they pop the hood, and there's like a 1970s radiator cap on it. And it's like, all these people and all this money don't know that that's the wrong radiator. It's one of those things that sure, only, a handful of people watching it see it, but it brings you right out of the movie. And it's just things. So for me, getting the period correct, it may be hard, but it's one of those things that when you get it right, you really, you feel like you accomplished something, especially this day and age where everything is kind of, either thrown out or, reconstructed or whatever. So you have to find a house that was built at the right time, and then they didn't remodel it to a degree that can't be cheap. It gets harder and harder to do these period films, especially on a low budget, but it's rewarding when you pull it off.
So your film getting released in Australia here soon. How can people watch it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it comes out in November in Australia, and I think they're going to, streaming, DVD, Blu-ray, all that good stuff. I mean, VOD, I'm excited to see how it's received there.
I definitely can't wait to see it. Another one of your films I'm excited to talk about. You worked with one of my favorite actors, Jake Busey in Pig Killer. Right, he played Robert Willie Pickerton. Got to tell me a little bit about what that production was like. It was like so great to see Jake back as a serial killer because like I love him in The Frighteners. It's one of my favorite films.
Oh, he's great. No, Jake was a great guy, and it was one of those things where we met him, and he was just so easygoing, and really liked the material, and had no fears of dropping trow and getting naked and doing all these horrible things. He was a trooper, and and a damn good actor. I was impressed with his performance, and he nothing bad to say about Jake. He was great from beginning to end.
No, Jake's great. He's a very underrated actor, and I hope he gets like more of a spotlight and more films. Like I crave his work. Like I love him in Starship Troopers as well. Like,
oh yeah, and a nice guy. And, that's the thing. Sometimes you when you meet actors that you idolize or whatever it might be, or you're a fan of, and then they're jerks. It's kind of, but no, he was top notch all the way through.
So tell me a little about your next project, Dorothea.
Dorothea Puente, who was a kind of a granny serial killer in Sacramento, California. She poisoned about 10 people and buried them in her backyard and continued to cash their Social Security checks.
Oh, wow.
And she was just, this big, smiley, the last person you would expect to be a serial killer. And no, she got caught in, 89, I believe. And then, she was sentenced to life and then died in prison a few years ago. And we made this movie about her, and it comes out next week. And it was a great thing. It's kind of, a Goodfellas meets, whatever happened to Baby Jane kind of vibe. So it's a neat film that the true crime for me is really neat because there's so many, not only different personalities of each killer, and with her, the woman you would never expect to be a serial killer, and then the way she did it, poisoning their drinks and then watching them die in front of her. There's this this dread the minute you're watching that one of her victims drink some booze, and you just know each swallow they're dying inside, and then and she's, going to bury him alive kind of thing. So it was a completely different, departure from Ed Kemper. And it was, it's fun to kind of make these things and be able to mix it up and, go a completely different style, whether it's mixing Goodfellas in there with, breaking the fourth wall and, narration and voiceover and all this fun stuff to kind of just mix it up a bit.
It's one thing serial killers are teaching us now is be wary of the nice person. Be friends with the bad guy. He ain't gonna hurt you. It's the nice people.
That's true.
So you say you're always thinking ahead. Dorothea's already filmed, I guess, and ready to release. So I guess you're already 10 steps ahead. What's after that one?
Yeah, I just locked picture on Sunset Strip Killers, which should be done with post-production by December. And then we start shooting Richard Ramirez, The Night Stalker, in February.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, no, it's pretty fucked up. I mean, it's really fucked up. There's no other way to put it.
Just put that on the cover. It's fucked up.
It's really fucked up. And it comes with a barf bag, and it's and then the Netflix did a pretty good documentary on him, but it's one of those things that it doesn't cover half the stuff. I mean, it's really just beyond. And for me, it's wanting to get into that, and not only the fear that the entire city of Los Angeles was under, and then even the world to a degree of knowing that someone could be this messed up, break into your house and do these horrible things to you. At that time was really kind of a phenomenal thing. So.
Yeah, here at Movieland, we love recommending movies. Can you give us 6 movies to watch? Old, new, sky's the limit.
Oh wow, watch Zader, House with Laughing Windows, 2 Italian films by a director named Pupi Avati. They're really just phenomenal. I mean, I can't recommend those 2 enough. Blue Sunshine is a good, creepy kind of political thriller about, from the director of Squirm, is a pretty good one. Gosh. Planet of the Vampires by Mario Bava is phenomenal. I mean, anything by Mario Bava is phenomenal. The Naked Prey is great. Riot on Cell Block 11 is another fantastic film. Just kind of go from, horror to film noir to, action. Sorcerer, William Friedkin is one of my favorite films. Treasure of the Sierra Madre, if you haven't seen that, go run out and watch it 10 times in a row. It's probably one of the greatest films ever made. I mean, Halloween 3, that's another favorite of mine. Exorcist 3 is another favorite of mine. I think that's a good start.
A lot there I haven't seen, so I'll enjoy more recommendations. I can never get enough to watch. Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, Chad, thank you so much for joining. Looking forward to seeing your projects, especially with Kemper on streaming as soon as it hits Australia. Thank you so much for joining us, bud.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And the kids will never know.